What if the one person who could save your soul was also the one person who could destroy your entire world? We're told that love conquers all, but does it? Can it really survive when it's built on a foundation of secrets? This is a story that challenges that very belief. A story that begins with a headline that seems torn from a modern fairy tale. He married his poor maid for love. It's the kind of romantic, impossible news that makes you think, just for a second, that maybe happy endings are real after all. On one side, you have Harold Daniels, a ruthless CEO living in a gilded cage, a man who could buy anything but couldn't feel a thing. On the other, Nicole Foster, a woman so invisible she might as well have been a ghost, cleaning up the messes of a world that refused to see her. They were from two different universes until an unexpected act of kindness sparked a love story that defied all logic. But what Harold didn't know is that he wasn't just marrying a woman with no past, he was marrying a woman with a forbidden past. This isn't just a story about rich versus poor. It's a powerful emotional journey that reveals a counterintuitive truth sometimes. The most devastating secrets are kept not to harm, but to protect. And it asks a question that will stick with you. What do you do when you discover the perfect love you've found is tied to a lie so profound that it changed everything? You're about to witness a story of humiliation, surprise, and the kind of heart-aching redemption that only comes after unimaginable sacrifice. This story will take you on an emotional roller coaster, from the cold corridors of a lonely mansion to a press conference that brought an empire to its knees. It's a tale about how one secret, one choice, and one incredible act of courage can redefine destiny. But before we dive into this incredible journey, we want to know how far our story has reached. Please, take a moment to tell us in the comments from what beautiful city in the world are you watching this right now. Let us know where you are. And if you're ready for a story that will truly move you, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what's next, and please, share this video with one person you know will be touched by it. Well, you see, Harold Daniels wasn't just a name whispered in boardrooms. It was a force of nature, a titan carved from ambition and success. So when he called that press conference, everyone expected another merger, another victory. Instead, they got a plot twist no one saw coming. He stood there, the epitome of power, and announced his marriage. It wasn't to a socialite or a rival's daughter, but to Nicole Foster, a woman who, until recently, had been his almost invisible poor maid. This was, he declared, a true love story, the kind that money simply can't buy. The room, you can imagine, went absolutely silent before erupting into a frenzy of hushed questions. It was a scene straight out of a movie, an emotional bombshell that sent shockwaves through the elite circles. Who was this Nicole Foster? A nobody, they sneered. The story was just too perfect, too clean. Harold spoke of her kindness, her quiet strength, and how she represented a redemption from the empty world he inhabited. He painted a picture of a love so pure it defied logic, a connection that felt like destiny from the moment he truly saw her. Of course, the cynics, and there were plenty, didn't buy it for a second. They looked at Nicole, standing slightly behind him, her simple elegance so out of place, and saw an angle. She must have a secret, a leverage point. They saw a woman who had played her cards right, a humble servant who had somehow ensnared the king of the castle. To them, this wasn't about overcoming differences, it was a masterfully executed plan, and the thought of it left a bitter taste in their mouths, a taste of a world turned upside down. And that's where the whispers began, slithering through the high society gatherings like smoke. Whispers about her, the poor maid with no history, no family to speak of. They hinted at a forbidden past, a life lived in shadows that she had conveniently left behind. The more Harold professed his love, the louder the rumors grew. It wasn't just gossip, it felt like a coordinated attack, an attempt to prove she was unworthy, To have her utterly humiliated before she could even settle into her new life. It's a funny thing, isn't it? The more someone tries to convince you of a perfect love story, the more you start looking for the cracks in the facade. Harold Daniels had staked his reputation on this surprise marriage, on the idea that love was the ultimate truth. He saw Nicole as his salvation, a beacon of light in his gilded cage. He was ready to fight for their future, to prove that their connection was real and that her past didn't matter, no matter how forbidden it might be. But the seeds of doubt had been planted, not just in the minds of the public, but in the very foundations of his own world. His family, his allies, his enemies were all watching, waiting for the inevitable fall. The announcement wasn't an ending to a fairy tale. It was the explosive beginning of something far more complicated. It was a move that changed everything, setting the stage for a battle where love, secrets, and revenge would collide. And it all started long before that fateful press conference. Let's wind the clock back, shall we? Picture this Nicole Foster on her very first day. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was a fortress of old money and unspoken rules, cold marble floors echoing with a chilling silence. She walked in, not with dreams of a love story, but with the simple, desperate hope of earning a living. From the get-go, she was less a person and more a part of the furniture. The Daniels family, a clan wrapped in arrogance, looked right through her, their eyes gliding past as if she were made of air. It was a masterclass in making someone feel small, a quiet kind of cruelty that leaves no bruises. Every polished surface seemed to mock her worn-out shoes, every priceless artifact a reminder of the chasm between their worlds. Nicole, the poor maid, learned quickly that her job wasn't just to clean, but to become invisible, to navigate the cavernous halls like a ghost. Her presence was tolerated only as long as it was completely and utterly unfelt, a truly soul-crushing welcome to her new life. She was handed a uniform, a gray, shapeless garment designed to erase any hint of individuality, and a list of duties that felt a mile long. No one bothered to learn her name, she was simply the help. Her attempts at a polite smile were met with icy stares, or even worse, complete indifference. It was a calculated strategy, of course, to ensure she understood her place in the grand, unfeeling machine of the Daniels household, a place where her own story and her own heart had no value whatsoever. Being treated as a nobody can do one of two things to a person: it can break you, or it can forge a core of resilience as hard as diamond. For Nicole, each dismissive glance and every unheard good morning became a layer of armor. She was there to do a job, to survive, and she wouldn't let their coldness extinguish the quiet flame of dignity inside her. She was determined that this chapter, however painful, would not be the end of her journey of overcoming. She focused on her work, her movements precise and silent, her face an unreadable mask. While the family saw a simple, poor maid, they were blind to the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she observed everything, the quiet strength she held in reserve. They had no idea that her silence wasn't weakness but a shield, protecting a secret so profound it could shatter their perfect, orderly world. They thought they were in control, but destiny had already set its pieces on the board. And so, she moved through the house, a silent observer in a world that refused to see her. She dusted frames holding faces that sneered at her existence, and polished tables where deals worth millions were made. Little did she know, this cold, isolating beginning was just the first step in a chain of events that would lead to a surprise no one could have predicted. The stage was being set, not for a tragedy, but for a revolution that would start with a single unnoticed figure. Now, where was Harold Daniels in all of this? Well, he was a king in his own right, but his kingdom was one of spreadsheets, stock, prices, and ruthless negotiations. He moved through his own home like a high-powered ghost, his mind 1,000 miles away, perpetually consumed by the next deal. To him, the staff were just cogs in the domestic machine, that kept his life running smoothly. He barely registered their faces, let alone their names. They were functions, not people, and that's how he liked it. So when Nicole Foster started working there, he genuinely didn't notice her. She was a blur of gray uniform in his peripheral vision, the silent presence that refilled his coffee and organized his study without a word. In his perfectly ordered world, she was simply the new maid, an interchangeable part. He wasn't cruel like his family, who was something far colder, indifferent. He wouldn't have been able to pick her out of a lineup if his life depended on it, a fact that speaks volumes about his emotional distance. His life was a fortress built to keep messy human emotions out. Love, connection, vulnerabilities, reliabilities in his line of work. Concepts had long since filed away as irrelevant. His heart was as cold and imposing as the mansion he lived in, a place where no one was granted access. He saw people as assets or threats, and a poor maid didn't even register on that scale. She was, for all intents and purposes, utterly and completely invisible to the man who would one day turn his world upside down for her. Head walked past her in the hallway, his eyes fixed on his phone, his mind already in a meeting that was hours away. Nicole, on her part, found it almost a relief. His indifference was a shield from the more overt disdain of his family. Under his vacant gaze, she could simply do her work, free from the pressure of interaction. She didn't seek his attention, she sought only to get through the day, unaware that destiny had a far more complicated plan in store for them both. It's a strange quirk of fate, isn't it? How two people can share the same space, breathe the same air, and yet exist in entirely separate universes. Harold was so focused on conquering the world outside his walls that he was completely blind to the quiet strength and profound kindness that had just walked through his front door. He saw an employee, nothing more, completely oblivious to the heart-aching journey that was about to begin. He was a man who had everything but was, in reality, deeply lonely. He just didn't know it yet. He saw Nicole as just another employee, but he was mistaken. He was looking at the woman who held the key to his own redemption, a surprise that was waiting to be discovered. And that discovery wouldn't come from a grand gesture, but from a small, simple act he was never meant to see. The Daniels mansion had another ghost, of sorts, Harold's younger sister, Clara. Frail and often overlooked, she was a lonely soul, adrift in a sea of familial ambition. The family treated her with a kind of impatient pity, but Nicole saw something else. She saw a girl who was just as invisible as she was. So one afternoon, Nicole did something simple. She found Clara crying in the garden, and instead of walking away, she sat down and spoke to her. Not as a servant, but as a friend. This wasn't a one-time thing. Nicole started leaving little folded paper animals for Clara to find, sharing quiet moments in the library, and listening to her with a genuine warmth that the girl had never known. It was an act of pure kindness, with no audience and no expectation of reward. For Nicole, it was a natural impulse to connect with another lonely heart, a small rebellion of compassion in a house devoid of it. She was offering a piece of her own strength to someone who had none. Now Harold Daniels had a habit. He was obsessed with security and control, and he would often review the footage from the dozens of cameras blanketing his property. It was usually a mindless exercise, a way to switch off his brain from work, but one evening, he saw it. He watched the footage from the garden, expecting nothing, and saw Nicole sitting with Clara. He watched her gentle smile, the patient way she listened, the genuine comfort she offered. It was a heart-aching scene of pure, unadulterated goodness. And that was it. That was the flicker. In a world of transactions and calculated moves, this was something different. It was real. For the first time, Nicole Foster wasn't just a gray uniform. She was a person capable of a profound act of kindness. This tiny moment, captured on a cold, unfeeling security camera, was a surprise jolt to his system. It broke through his emotional armor in a way that multi-million-dollar deals never could, sparking the very first flicker of genuine interest. He started watching for her on the cameras, not out of suspicion, but out of a newfound curiosity. He saw her leaving a flower on Clara's nightstand, humming a soft tune while she worked, treating every object and every person with a quiet respect. He was seeing a side of her that was completely hidden from the rest of his family, a secret, well of compassion that captivated him. He was a man who could buy anything, but he was witnessing something truly priceless. He didn't act on it, not yet. He just observed, the secret spectator to a quiet drama of human connection. But a seed had been planted in the barren ground of his heart. This poor maid, this invisible woman, was turning out to be the most interesting person in his entire gilded world. And while he was just beginning to see her, someone else in the house was starting to watch her for entirely different reasons. Harold's mother, Eleanor Daniels, was a woman who trusted no one and believed everyone had a hidden agenda. She operated on suspicion the way others operated on oxygen. When she noticed her son's subtle shift in demeanor, his gaze lingering a moment too long in the direction of the new maid, her internal alarms went off. To her, this wasn't a potential love story, it was a threat, a hostile takeover of her son's affections by a nobody, a common poor maid. So she decided to do some snooping of her own. Under the guise of a routine room inspection, a power move she often used to keep the staff on their toes, Eleanor entered Nicole's sparse, simple room. It was neat and impersonal, offering no clues until she looked under the mattress. Tucked away, as if hidden in a hurry, was a single faded photograph. It showed a much younger Nicole standing with a well-dressed, powerful-looking man, his face obscured by a shadow, in front of a grand estate that was definitely not a shack. This was it. This was the chink in the armor. A poor maid with a photograph. Like that, it didn't add up. Eleanor's mind raced with possibilities. Who was the man? Was this a secret from a forbidden past? Proof of a life of scheming? She saw the photo not as a memento, but as evidence of a long con. The girl wasn't just some innocent waif, she was a predator, and Eleanor was determined to be the one to expose her and have her humiliated for her deceit. Her investigation began immediately, all done with the quiet, ruthless efficiency she was known for. She hired a private investigator, a discreet man who specialized in digging up the kind of dirt that could ruin lives. Find out everything, she commanded, her voice like ice. I want to know where she came from, who her family is, every secret she's hiding. I want the truth, and I will use it to get her out of my son's life and my house for good. Eleanor felt a thrill of anticipation, the promise of a satisfying revenge against the girl who dared to upset the balance of her world. She was convinced that Nicole Foster was a fraud, and this investigation would be her undoing. The photograph was the key, the first thread she could pull to unravel the entire tapestry of lies she was sure Nicole had woven. It was the beginning of a hunt, and Eleanor Daniels was a relentless hunter. Meanwhile, Nicole had no idea that her most treasured and most painful secret was now in the hands of her greatest enemy in the household. She continued her work, her quiet kindness a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing. She was worried about keeping her job and protecting her heart, completely unaware that a far bigger storm was gathering on the horizon, one that threatened to expose a forbidden past she had given up everything to escape. The annual Daniels Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, a place to see and be seen. By now, Harold had made his interest in Nicole clearer, insisting she attend not as staff but as his guest. She wore a simple, elegant blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, but to this crowd, it might as well have been rags. The vultures began to circle, led by Harold's exfiancy, a venomous socialite named Veronica who had been unceremoniously dumped and was thirsty for revenge. Veronica cornered Nicole near the champagne fountain, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness that was louder than a shout. "Oh, my dear," she cooed, gesturing to Nicole's dress. "How quaint. It's so brave of you to wear something so humble. Did Harold forget to give you a clothing allowance?" The words were designed to cut deep, to have Nicole utterly humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. The surrounding guests snickered, enjoying the blood sport. Nicole stood frozen, her face pale, the joy of the evening evaporating. But then, something no one expected happened. Harold, who had been across the room, seemed to materialize out of thin air. He wrapped a protective arm around Nicole's waist, his eyes blazing with a fire no one had ever seen. "Her dress," he said, his voice dangerously low and clear, silencing. "The entire area is worth more than your entire trust fund, Veronica. Because it's worn with integrity, something you wouldn't recognize if it was sewn into every one of your designer gowns. Now apologize to her." The shock in the room was palpable. It was a massive surprise. Harold Daniels, the man of cold logic and emotional detachment, was defending his poor maid with the ferocity of a lion. He didn't just deflect the insult, he turned it back on Veronica, exposing her cruelty for all to see. It wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. In that moment, he was telling the world that Nicole was his, and an attack on her was an attack on him. Veronica, stunned and outplayed, could only stammer before making a hasty retreat. For Nicole, it was a heart-aching moment that changed everything. To be seen, to be valued, to be defended so fiercely, it was a feeling she had never known. She looked up at Harold, and for the first time, she saw past the powerful CEO. She saw a man of surprising depth and passion, a man who was willing to risk his social standing for her. It was a turning point, the moment a fragile curiosity began to blossom into the first real bud of a love story. Harold led her away from the gawking crowd, his hand still firmly on her back. The incident had been ugly, a blatant attempt at public humiliation, but the outcome was a surprise victory. He had not only protected Nicole, but he had also drawn a clear line in the sand for everyone, including his own family, to see. His feelings were no longer a subtle interest, they were now out in the open, and he was ready for the fight. After the gala incident, the dynamic shifted. The invisible wall between them had been shattered. Harold, now openly captivated, found himself creating excuses, however flimsy, just to be near Nicole. He'd accidentally bump into her in the library, to ask her opinion on a book he wasn't reading, or he'd wander into the kitchen late at night to ask her questions about her day. He was like a teenager with his first crush, awkward and obvious, but utterly sincere in his attempts to connect. He was hungry for information, desperate to understand the woman who had so thoroughly captured his attention. "Where did you grow up?" He'd ask. "Tell me about your family." He wasn't interrogating her, he was genuinely trying to piece together the puzzle of who she was. He wanted to know the story behind the quiet strength and the surprising kindness he had witnessed. He felt that understanding her past was the key to understanding the powerful hold she had on him. But Nicole remained a closed book. She was guarded, her answers polite but incredibly vague. "Oh, it was a small town, you wouldn't have heard of it," she'd say with a dismissive smile. When asked about family, she would simply state, "It's just me now." It was clear she was hiding something, a forbidden past that was a no-go area. Every question he asked was met with a gentle but firm deflection, a verbal wall that he couldn't seem to break through. This wasn't a game to her, it was a matter of survival. Her past was a place of pain and betrayal, a secret she had to protect at all costs, especially from him. The Daniels family, she believed, represented the very world she had escaped from, a world of power and cruelty. She couldn't risk him discovering the truth, so she kept him at arm's length, afraid that letting him in would mean unearthing a past that could destroy the fragile new life she was trying to build. Her reluctance only deepened his fascination. Why so much secrecy? What could possibly be so terrible that she couldn't even speak of it? His logical mind couldn't compute it. Harold was used to getting what he wanted, and what he wanted now were answers. He saw her guardedness not as a rejection, but as a challenge, a sign of a deep wound that he felt an inexplicable urge to heal. Her secret became a mystery he was determined to solve. He didn't push too hard, sensing it would only make her retreat further. Instead, he decided to change his tactics. If he couldn't learn about her past through questions, perhaps he could get her to reveal her present, her thoughts, her dreams. He knew, with a certainty that shook him, that there was so much more to her than the vague answers she gave. He just needed to find the right key to unlock the door to her heart. The breakthrough came one night during a thunderstorm that rattled the old mansion to its bones. Harold found Nicole in the library, staring out at the rain-streaked window, a rare, unguarded look of melancholy on her face. He didn't ask about her past this time. Instead, he simply said, "They say a storm can make a big house feel even bigger and emptier." It was the right thing to say, an admission of his own loneliness that echoed hers. For the first time, she truly opened up, not about the details of her life, but about her feelings. They talked for hours, not as a CEO and a poor maid, but as two lonely people. She spoke of what it feels like to be an outsider, to watch life from the sidelines. He, in turn, confessed the crushing isolation of being at the top, surrounded by people who only wanted something from him. It was a raw, emotional, and deeply heartaching conversation, a meeting of two souls who understood each other's solitude. It was in that conversation that Harold saw the real Nicole Foster, and he was utterly spellbound. She wasn't just kind, she was incredibly intelligent, her insights sharp and her perspective profound. She spoke about books and philosophy with a passion that revealed a mind that had been starved for real conversation. He saw a strength in her that was forged in fire, an unwavering spirit that had refused to be broken by whatever hardship she had faced. This was the moment he fell completely and irrevocably in love. It had nothing to do with her looks or any sense of novelty. He fell in love with her mind, with her resilience, with the beautiful, wounded, and incredibly strong soul she revealed to him in the dead of night. This connection was more real and more valuable than any company he had ever acquired or any fortune he had ever made. He realized that wealth was a prison, and she was the key to his freedom. She, too, saw a different side of Harold. Beneath the powerful, emotionally distant exterior was a man who felt just as lost as she did. She saw a vulnerability that he showed to no one else, a longing for something real in his artificial world. In that moment, he wasn't her boss, he was just a man, sharing his fears and his loneliness with her. It was a powerful connection, one that felt like destiny finally revealing its hand. As the storm subsided outside, a different kind of calm settled between them. The secrets of her forbidden past remained unspoken, but a new, more important truth had been revealed. They were not so different after all. For Harold, this conversation changed everything. He no longer cared about where she came from, he only cared about where they could go together, and he was ready to risk it all to find out. The late-night conversation in the library was the point of no return for Harold. He was done playing games, done with the cautious dance around their feelings. He was in love, a feeling so powerful and consummating it dwarfed every other ambition had ever had. He saw in Nicole Foster not a project or a curiosity, but his partner, his equal, the missing piece of his own soul. Her kindness wasn't a performance, it was the very core of her being, a genuine heart in a world full of fakes. So he did what any man madly in love would do. He proposed. It wasn't a grand public spectacle. It was a quiet, private moment, just the two of them. He didn't offer her wealth or status, he offered her his heart, his protection, and a promise to spend the rest of his life proving he was worthy of her. For Nicole, who had never expected more than a paycheck, It was a surprise so profound it left her breathless. It was the culmination of a love story she never dared to dream of. His family's reaction, as you can imagine, was nothing short of volcanic. His mother, Eleanor, was apoplectic, accusing Nicole of being a gold-digging witch who had somehow bewitched her son. His siblings saw it as a catastrophic business decision, a move that would make the family a laughingstock. They threatened. They pleaded, they raged. They saw this as the ultimate humiliation, their legacy being handed over to a poor maid with a mysterious past. But Harold stood firm, a rock against their tidal wave of outrage. For the first time in his life, he was actively defying them, choosing his own happiness over their expectations. He told them, in no uncertain terms, that his decision was final. He believed that their love was a force strong enough to bridge the chasm between their worlds, a testament to the power of overcoming social barriers and prejudice. He was naive, perhaps, but he was also deeply in love. He truly believed that love was enough. He thought that by marrying Nicole, he could protect her from the world and from her own forbidden past, whatever it might be. He saw their union as a form of redemption for them both, from a life of emotional emptiness and hers from a life of hardship. It was a beautiful, romantic ideal, the kind of belief that can either build a kingdom or lead to utter ruin. And so, they planned a wedding, a small ceremony against the backdrop of his family's fury. Harold was blinded by love, convinced he was at the end of a fairy tale, the start of their happily ever after. He had no idea that he was actually standing at the precipice of a much darker story, one where the biggest threat wouldn't come from his family, but from a cryptic message that was about to blow their entire world apart. Their wedding day arrived, a bubble of defiant joy in a sea of familial disapproval. Nicole looked breathtaking, her simple elegance outshining any diamond. Harold had never been more certain of anything in his life. As they stood together, exchanging vows, it felt like a victory, the ultimate proof that their love story could conquer all. They were two souls, once lost and lonely, who had found their home in each other. It was a beautiful, emotional, and heart-aching ceremony, a perfect moment of peace. But as the small reception began, a hotel staff member handed Harold a crisp, white envelope. There was no name, no return address, just his own name typed neatly on the front. Assuming it was a congratulatory note, he opened it casually. Inside, a single sheet of paper held a short, chilling message. Each word a perfectly typed drop of poison. You married a ghost. Her past is a lie, and it will destroy you. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Suddenly, the joyous music of the reception seemed to fade into a dull roar in his ears. The words on the page felt like a physical blow, a shard of ice piercing through the warmth of the day. A ghost? A lie? Destroy you? It was a plot twist so cruel and so perfectly timed it had to be intentional. He looked across the room at his new wife, Nicole, laughing with his sister Clara, and a cold dread began to seep into his veins. Who would send this? And why? Was it his mother, making one last desperate attempt to sabotage his happiness? Was it Veronica, his ex-fiancée, seeking a final bitter revenge? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone connected to the forbidden past that Nicole refused to speak of? The possibilities swirled in his mind, each one more venomous than the last. The note was a weapon, designed not just to inform, but to infect his mind with the very poison he had fought so hard to ignore. Doubt. He tried to shake it off, to dismiss it as a pathetic, cowardly attack from a jealous enemy. He crumpled the note in his fist, his knuckles white. He had chosen to trust Nicole, to believe in the goodness he saw in her. He had staked his future on that belief. But the words had found their mark. They echoed the very fears his family had been screaming at him for weeks, giving voice to the tiny, nagging questions he had buried deep inside his own heart. The perfect day was now tainted. As he smiled at his bride and went through the motions of a happy groom, his mind was a battlefield. He had promised to protect her, but the note suggested that she was the real danger. The promise of their beautiful love story was now overshadowed by the threat of a secret so powerful it could apparently destroy him. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was about to grow into something monstrous. In the weeks that followed the wedding, Harold tried his best to forget the cryptic note. He wanted to believe it was a lie, a desperate ploy. But a warning like that, once heard, is impossible to unhear. The doubt began to fester, a slow-acting poison that colored his every interaction with Nicole. He started noticing things he might have otherwise dismissed, small details that now seemed like giant, flashing red flags. He was looking for cracks, and suddenly, he saw them everywhere. The most unnerving were the phone calls. He would walk into a room and find Nicole on her phone, her back to him, her voice a hushed, anxious whisper. The moment she sensed his presence, she would end the call abruptly, often with a panicked "I have to go." Shed turned to him with a forced smile, her eyes filled with a flicker of fear that she couldn't quite hide. When he asked who was on the phone, her answers were always evasive: a wrong number, an old friend, no one important. These weren't the relaxed, happy calls of a newlywed. They were the conversations of someone with a secret, someone living a double life. Who was she talking to with such urgency and fear? What part of her life was she so desperately hiding from him? Each hushed call was another crack in the foundation of their trust. He remembered the note, her past as a lie, and an awful, sinking feeling took hold in his stomach. Was this the lie? Was she still entangled in something from her forbidden past? He hated the man he was becoming, suspicious, watchful, a spy in his own home. He loved this woman with all his heart, but the doubt was a corrosive acid, eating away at his peace of mind. He felt trapped between his love for her and the terrifying possibility that she was not who she seemed to be. The emotional toll was immense, casting a shadow over what should have been the happiest time of their lives. He was caught in a nightmare of uncertainty. Every vague answer, every startled look, every secret phone call seemed to confirm his worst fears. He was married to a stranger, a beautiful, kind stranger with a hidden life he knew nothing about. He wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but he was afraid. What if the truth was exactly what the note promised? What if it really could destroy him, and more importantly, destroy the love story he had sacrificed so much for? He knew he couldn't live like this, tortured by whispers and shadows. The joy of their union was being replaced by an atmosphere of anxiety and mistrust. He had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The guilt of going behind her back warred with his desperate need for answers. And with a heavy heart, Harold Daniels made a decision. He would find out the truth about his wife's secret, once and for all. The decision to investigate his own wife felt like a betrayal, a violation of the vows he had just taken. The guilt was a heavy cloak on his shoulders. This was Nicole, the woman whose kindness had saved him from his own emotional wasteland. But the doubt, fueled by the note and the secret phone calls, was a fire he couldn't extinguish. The desperate need to know the truth finally outweighed the guilt. Harold Daniels decided to do what he did best: deploy his vast resources to solve a problem. He didn't hire his mother's bulldog investigator. This required absolute discretion. He used a small, elite cybersecurity firm that owed him a major favor: people who could move through the digital world like ghosts. His instructions were simple and gut-wrenching. I want to know everything about Nicole Foster's life before she came to work for me. Everything. He handed over her photo and the little information he had, feeling like the worst kind of traitor. The investigation began, a silent, digital excavation of his wife's forbidden past. Every day, Harold would go through the motions of their life together, smiling, talking, sharing a bed with the woman he was secretly investigating. The hypocrisy, of it all was eating him alive. He watched her, looking for any sign of deception, feeling a pang of guilt every time she showed him an act of genuine kindness, which was often. Was this all an act? He was torn apart, a man at war with himself. One part of him, the part that loved her, prayed that the investigation would turn up nothing, that it would all be a misunderstanding, proving her past was simply one of hardship, not deceit. The other part, the cold, logical CEO, needed the data, the facts. He had to know what he was dealing with. What secrets were so important that she would risk their entire love story to keep them hidden? The days stretched into a week, each one filled with a quiet, agonizing tension. He felt a growing distance between them, a chasm created by his own suspicion. He was so consumed by his search for her secret that he was neglecting the very connection he was trying to protect. It was a cruel irony in his quest to secure their future. He was actively poisoning their present, and he knew it. Then the call came. The head of the firm, a man who never wasted words, said simply, "We found something. Something big. You're not going to believe it." Harold's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. He felt a potent cocktail of fear and a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty was about to end. He braced himself for the worst, for a revelation that could confirm his fears and change everything forever. Harold sat in his stark, soundproofed office, the digital file open on his screen. As he read, the world around him seemed to dissolve. The report wasn't just big, it was a bombshell. A plot twist so profound it completely re-engineered his reality. Nicole Foster wasn't a Foster at all. Her real name was Nicole Beaumont, and she was the one and only daughter of Marcus Beaumont, the brilliant entrepreneur who had been his father's greatest and most bitter rival for years. The story laid out in the file was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Marcus Beaumont had been on the verge of a major breakthrough that would have eclipsed the Daniels empire. But Harold's own father, in a ruthless and legally dubious act of corporate warfare, had not just defeated him, he had annihilated him. He ruined Beaumont's company, destroyed his reputation, and bankrupted him completely. The man had lost everything, a victim of a brutal winner-take-all game. And Nicole had been caught in the crossfire. After the fall, the proud and broken Marcus Beaumont, ashamed of his failure, had cut ties with his high society life and, in a fit of despair, had disinherited his own daughter to protect her from the stain of his name. He had essentially forced her into hiding, to erase her own identity, to become a ghost. She hadn't come from poverty, she had been violently thrust into it, stripped of her name, her fortune, and her family by an act committed by Harold's own father. Suddenly, it all made a horrifying kind of sense. The guardedness, the vague answers, the fear in her eyes. It wasn't the deception of a con artist, it was the terror of a survivor. Her forbidden past wasn't a shameful secret, it was a catastrophic wound. The hushed phone calls were likely with the few people from her old life who knew she was alive, or perhaps even with her broken father, hiding in obscurity. The weight of this revelation was crushing. He had married the daughter of his family's greatest enemy. The woman he loved was a living embodiment of his own family's sins. The potential for a story of revenge was staggering. He could see the headlines. Now the scandal that would erupt if this ever came out. His family, his company, everything he had built could be threatened by this single devastating truth. But as the initial shock subsided, a different, more powerful emotion took its place. It wasn't fear of scandal or anger at the deception. It was a profound, heart-wrenching wave of understanding and empathy for the woman he had just married. He finally understood the secret she was carrying, and the reason she had fought so desperately to keep it hidden. In an instant, every suspicion had ever had was incinerated by the light of this new truth. Harold looked back at every interaction with Nicole, and it was like watching a familiar movie with a plot twist that changes the meaning of every scene. She wasn't hiding from him, she was protecting him. She had fallen in love with the son of the man who had destroyed her entire world. The emotional complexity of that, the sheer agony of it, was almost unimaginable. He realized the incredible sacrifice she had made. She had given up her name, her identity, and any claim to what was left of her old life, all to escape the poisonous legacy of the Daniels-Beaumont feud. She took a job as a poor maid in the lion's den itself, not as an act of revenge, but perhaps as a desperate, ironic attempt at survival, hiding in the one place no one would ever think to look for a Beaumont. It was a move of incredible, terrifying bravery. Her secret wasn't a weapon she was planning to use against him, it was a shield she was using to protect them both. If the world discovered who she was, it would ignite a firestorm. The media would paint her as a schemer, a gold digger seeking revenge. They would tear their love story to shreds, using the sins of their fathers to invalidate the genuine connection they had built. She was trying to preserve the one pure thing she had found: their love. This realization was a moment of profound redemption for him. He had doubted her, investigated her, and harbored ugly suspicions, all while she was quietly carrying this impossible burden. The guilt he felt now was immense, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of awe. Her strength was greater than he had ever imagined. She had been living with a secret that would have crushed most people, yet she had shown nothing but grace and kindness. He understood now that her reluctance to talk about her forbidden past wasn't a rejection of him, but a desperate act of love. She must have been terrified every single day that he would find out, that the truth would make him hate her, or worse, that it would force him to choose between her and his own family. She had chosen a life of silence and fear to give their improbable love story a chance to survive. With the truth laid bare, Harold felt a clarity he hadn't felt in months. The enemy wasn't Nicole. The enemy was his own father's legacy, a dark shadow that had loomed over both their lives without him. Even knowing it, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't let her carry this burden alone any longer. He wouldn't let the past destroy their future. He had to act, not as a CEO protecting his assets, but as a husband protecting his wife. Harold finally understood the true source of Nicole's power. Her relentless kindness, the quality that had first drawn him to her, wasn't the product of a simple, naive heart. It was a conscious choice, a defiant act of rebellion against a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty. It was a strength forged in the heart of betrayal, first by his family's actions, and then by her own father's abandonment. To remain kind after all, that was nothing short of miraculous. Most people, after suffering such a profound loss, would have become bitter, consumed by a desire for revenge. It would have been so easy for Nicole to hate him, to see him as nothing more than the heir to her family's destruction. But she hadn't. She had looked past his name, past his wealth, and had seen the lonely man underneath. Her ability to love him was the ultimate testament to her character, a heart-aching act of grace that he knew he didn't deserve. He thought about her interactions with his sister, Clara. She had connected with the other invisible person in the house, not out of pity, but out of a deep, personal understanding of what it felt like to be discarded and overlooked by your own family. Her compassion was authentic because it was born from her own pain. It wasn't a weakness she had to overcome, it was the greatest weapon in her arsenal, the very thing that made her unbreakable. The whole narrative had flipped. The world saw a poor maid who got lucky. He now saw a queen who had been forced to live as a pauper, her integrity her only remaining crown. Her journey was the ultimate story of overcoming, not just poverty, but the kind of deep, emotional trauma that can poison a soul. Yet, her soul remained pure. She had chosen light when everyone around her had chosen darkness. This understanding solidified his love into something unshakable, something akin to worship. He wasn't just in love with her, he was in awe of her. He realized that the greatest treasure he had ever found wasn't a company or a deal, but this woman's incredible, resilient heart. She had faced the worst of human nature and had responded not with hate, but with a quiet, unwavering kindness that was more powerful than any army. Now, everything was crystal clear. His path was no longer shrouded in doubt. He knew that just protecting their secret wasn't enough. Hiding would mean living under the shadow of his father's sins forever. True redemption required more. It required truth. It required justice. He had to clear her name and her father's name, even if it meant tearing his own family apart. It was a terrifying prospect, but for her, he would do it. Harold called another press conference, and the room buzzed with the same energy as the day he announced his marriage. But this time, his demeanor was different. It wasn't joyful defiance, it was steel. He stood at the podium, with Nicole by his side, no longer standing behind him, but right beside him, as an equal. He took a deep breath and began to speak, not about business, but about a long-buried crime. He laid out, with cold, hard evidence, the story of his father's treachery against Marcus Beaumont. The reporters were stunned into silence. Harold Daniels was systematically dismantling his own family's legacy in front of the entire world. He exposed the illegal tactics, the corporate espionage, the lies that had ruined an innocent man. He wasn't just admitting to a past wrong, he was taking full responsibility for it, offering a public, unequivocal apology to the Beaumont family. It was an act of corporate and familial suicide, a kamikaze mission for the sake of truth. Then he turned to his wife. He introduced her to the world not as Nicole Foster, the poor maid, but as Nicole Beaumont, the woman who had survived it all. He told them she had hidden her identity not out of shame, but to protect them from this very secret. He declared that her kindness and integrity, forged in the fires of that betrayal, were the greatest assets his company and his life would ever know. He called her strength, not her hidden, potential inheritance, the greatest treasure he had ever found. It was an emotional, powerful, and utterly heartaching speech. He wasn't just clearing her name, he was crowning her, showing the world that her worth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with her character. He was choosing her publicly and absolutely, over his own name, his own father, and his own past. It was the ultimate act of love and redemption, a sacrifice that mirrored her own quiet one. Their love story was no longer a secret whispered in gossip columns. It was a legend being born. The fallout was immediate and immense. His father was disgraced. His family was shattered. But in the wreckage, something new and better began to grow. The public, initially hungry for a scandal, was won over by the raw honesty of their story, a tale of overcoming the sins of the past. Marcus Beaumont, his name finally cleared, slowly began to reconcile with his daughter, his heart softened by Harold's public act of repentance. This single event changed everything, forever. It redefined both their families, paving the way for a new legacy built not on ruthless ambition, but on truth and integrity. Harold and Nicole had faced the ultimate plot twist and had not just survived but triumphed. They had proven that love wasn't just about conquering differences, but about having the courage to face the darkest truths together, and in doing so, creating your own destiny. And so we come to the end of this incredible journey. A story that began with a shocking announcement and unraveled into a breathtaking tale of secrets, sacrifice, and ultimately, redemption. From a poor maid treated as invisible to a woman whose integrity brought an empire to its knees, Nicole's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the life you're born into, but the choices you make. And Harold's journey shows us that it's never too late to break free from a toxic legacy and fight for what truly matters. Their love story wasn't a simple fairy tale, it was a trial by fire. They faced a forbidden past, public humiliation, and the deepest kind of personal betrayal, yet they emerged not just intact but stronger. They proved that love isn't just about affection, It's about having the courage to expose the truth, no matter the cost, and to build a new future together. One based on honesty and a kindness that changed everything. Now we'd love to hear from you. This story was filled with so many emotional twists and turns. What part of their journey impacted you the most? Was it the moment Harald defended Nicole at the party? Or the heart-stopping revelation about her true identity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're also curious, did you expect an ending like this? Or did you have a different outcome in mind? We read every single comment. If this story of overcoming and redemption touched your heart, please take a moment to give this video a like. It helps us reach more people who need to hear stories like this. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss the incredible narratives we have coming your way. Be sure to also check out our older videos for more powerful stories. Thank you for spending your time with us.